Yes, welcome back. Let's continue reading. I'm not getting up my bed. Just try to read as many as possible before my camcorder's out of power.
Boeing 314 Clipper. Boeing 314 Clipper. A Boeing 314 flying low-roller flying boat airliner, national origin United States manufacturer, Boeing Airplane Company, first flight June 7, 1938. Introduction 1939. Retired 1948. Status retired. Primary users Pan American, World Airways, British Overseas Airways Corporation, United States Navy. Produced 1938-1941. Number build 12. The Boeing 314 Clipper was an American long-range flying boat produced by Boeing from 1938 to 1941. One of the largest aircraft of its time, it had the range to cross the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. For its wing, Boeing reused the design from the earlier XB-15 bomber prototype. 12 Clippers were built, 9 of which served with Pan Am. Design and development. The Yankee Clipper in 1939. Pan American had requested a truly trans-Pacific flying boat with unprecedented range and double the passenger payload of the airline's Martin M130. Boeing's bid was successful, and on the 21st of July, 1936, Pan American signed a contract for 6 Boeing engineers adapted the cancelled XB-15's 149 feet, 45 m, wing, and replaced the 850 HP, 630 kilowatts, Pratt & Whitney twin wasp radial engines with the 1600 HP, 1200 kilowatts, Wright twin Cyclone. 1. Pan Am ordered 6 more aircraft with increased engine power and capacity for 77 daytime passengers as the Boeing 314. The huge flying boat was assembled at Boeing's Plant 1 on the Duwamish River in Seattle, and towed to Elliott Bay for taxi and flight tests. The first flight was on the 7th of June, 1938. Piloted by Edmund T. Eddie Allen. At first the aircraft had a single vertical tail, and Allen found he had inadequate directional control. The aircraft returned to the factory and was fitted with fin plates on the ends of the horizontal tail in place of the single vertical fin. This too was found to be insufficient, and finally the centerline vertical fin was restored, after which the aircraft flew satisfactorily. 2. The 314 used a series of heavy ribs and spars to create a robust fuselage and cantilevered wing, eliminating the need for external drag-inducing struts to brace the wings. Boeing also incorporated Ornia-style sponsons into the hull structure. 3. The sponsons' broad lateral extensions at the waterline on both sides of the hull served several purposes. They provided a wide platform to stabilize aircraft while floating. They acted as a gangway for boarding and exiting, and they possessed intentional shaping to contribute additional aerodynamic lift in flight. To fly the long ranges needed for trans-Pacific service, the 314 carried 4,246 US gallons, 16,070 L. 3,536 gal of gasoline. The later 314 model carried a further 1,200 US gallons, 4,500 L, 1,000 gal. A capacity of 300 US gallons, 1,100 L, 250 gal, of oil was required for operation of radial engines. The California Clipper at Cavite, the Philippines, 1940. Pan Am's Clippers were built for one-class luxury air travel, a necessity given the long duration of transoceanic flights. The seats could be converted into 36 bunks for overnight accommodation, with a cruising speed of 188 miles per hour, 303 kilometers per hour. Typical flights at maximum gross weight were flown at 155 miles per hour, 249 kilometers per hour, in 1940. Pan Am's schedule San Francisco to Honolulu was 19 hours. Clipper service catered to elite businessmen and wealthy traveler. The 314s had a lounge and dining area, and the galleys were crewed by chefs from 4-star hotels. Men and women were provided with separate dressing rooms, and white-coated stewards served 5- and 6-course meals with gleaming silver service. The standard of luxury on Pan American's Boeing 314s has rarely been matched on heavier-than-air transport since then. A round trip from New York to Southampton was $675, equivalent to $14,000 in 2022, while a one-way ticket from San Francisco to Hong Kong via the Stepping Stone Islands was listed at $760, equivalent to $16,000 in 2022. 5. The Pan Am Boeing 314 Clippers brought exotic destinations like the Far East within reach of air travelers and came to represent the romance of flight. Most of the flights were trans-Pacific, while transatlantic flights to neutral Lisbon and Ireland continued after war broke out in Europe in September 1939, and until 1945. But military passengers and cargoes necessarily go priority, and the service was more Spartan. Equally critical to the 314's success was the proficiency of its Pan Am flight crews, who were extremely skilled at long-distance, over-water flight operations and navigation. For training, many of the trans-Pacific flights carried a second crew. 6. Only the very best and most experienced flight crews were assigned Boeing 314 flying boat duty. Before coming aboard, all Pan Am captains as well as first and second officers had thousands of hours of flight time in other seaplanes and flying boats. Rigorous training in dead reckoning, timed turns, judging drift from sea current, celestial navigation, and radio navigation were conducted. In conditions of poor or no visibility, pilots sometimes made successful landings at fogged-in harbors by landing out to sea, then taxiing the 314 into port. 7. Operational history. Boeing 314 in U.S. Navy colors, c. 1942. The first 314 flight on the San Francisco-Hong Kong route left Alameda on the 23rd of February, 1939 with regular passenger and foreign airmail route -14 service beginning on March 29. 8, 9, 10. A one-way trip on this route took over 6 days to complete. Commercial passenger service lasted less than 3 years, ending when the United States entered World War II in December 1941. Passengers on their baggage were weighed, with each passenger allowed up to 77 pounds, 35 kilograms, free baggage allowance, in the later 314 series, but then charged $3.25 per pound, $7.2/kilogram, equivalent to $68 in 2022, for exceeding the limit. 11. The Yankee Clipper flew across the Atlantic on a route from Southampton to Port Washington, New York with intermediate stops at Foynes in Ireland, Boatwood in Newfoundland, and Shediac, New Brunswick. The inaugural trip occurred on the 24th of June, 1939. Boeing 314 Clipper in Shediac Bay, c. 1941 flown triptych cover carried around the world on PAA Boeing 314 Clippers and Imperial Airways Shorts 23 flying boats the 24th of June July 28, 1939. The success of the 6 initial Clippers had led Pan Am to place an order for 6 improved 314 models to be delivered in 1941. With goal of doubling the service on both Atlantic and Pacific routes. However, the fall of France in 1940 caused some doubt about whether the Atlantic service could continue. Passenger numbers were already reduced by the war, and if Spain or Portugal were to join the Axis, then the flights to Lisbon would be forced to stop. Pan Am began to consider reducing its order and, in August 1940, reached an agreement to sell 3 of the 6 under construction to the United Kingdom. The aircraft were to be operated by the British Overseas Airways Corporation, BORC, and were primarily intended for the UK West Africa route, as existing flying boats could not travel this route without stopping in Lisbon. The sale made a small net profit for Pan Am, priced at cost plus 5%, and provided a vital communications link for Britain, but was politically controversial. In order to arrange the sale, the junior minister Harold Balfour had to agree to the contract with no government approval, leading to stern disapproval from Winston Churchill and lengthy debate by the cabinet over the propriety of the purchase. 12. Churchill later flew on the Bristol and Berwick, 13, which he praised intensely, 12, adding to the Clipper's fame during the year. 14. At the outbreak of the war in the Pacific in December 1941, the Pacific Clipper was en route to New Zealand from San Francisco. Rather than risk flying back to Honolulu and being shot down by Japanese fighters, it was directed to fly west to New York. Starting on the 8th of December 1941 at Auckland, New Zealand, the Pacific Clipper covered over 31,500 mi, 50,700 kilometers, via locations including Surabaya, Karachi, Bahrain, Khartoum and Leopoldville. The Pacific Clipper landed at Pan American's LaGuardia Field Seaplane Base at 7:12 on the morning of January 6, 1942. 15. Pan Am's Clipper fleet was pressed into U.S. military service during World War II, and the flying boats were used for ferrying personnel and equipment to the European and Pacific fronts. The aircraft were purchased by the War and Navy departments and leased back to Pan Am for $1, with the understanding that all would be operated by the Navy once 4 engine replacements for the Army's 4 Clippers were in service. Only the markings on the aircraft changed. The Clippers continued to be flown by their experienced Pan Am civilian crews. American military cargo was carried via Natal, Brazil to Liberia, to supply the British forces at Cairo and even the Russians, via the Persian Corridor. The Model 314 was then the only aircraft in the world that could make the 2,150 statute mile, 3,460 kilometers, crossing over water. 16. The Army gave the aircraft the designation C-98, but the Navy, which used a different designation system at the time, disregarded this designation and operated the aircraft under the company designation B-314. 17. In February 1942, 40 women were hired by Pan Am to replace male mechanics in the hangars at LaGuardia to perform service, repair and overhaul of the Clippers. For the European service. 18. Maintenance demands were such that it took 141 mechanics working 3 8-hour shifts to perform in 2 days the complete inspection of servicing routine, which must be carried out before a Clipper just in from Europe can be sent on the return trip. 19. Since the Pan Am pilots and crews had extensive expertise in using flying boats for extreme long-distance over-water flights, the company's pilots and navigators continued to serve as flight crew. In 1943, President Franklin D. Roosevelt traveled to the Casablanca Conference in a Pan Am crewed Boeing 314 Dixie Clipper. 13. After the war, several Clippers were returned to Pan American hands. However, even before hostilities had ended, the Clipper had become obsolete. The flying boat's advantage had been that it did not require long concrete runways, but during the war many such runways had been built for heavy bombers. 13. New long-range airliners such as the Lockheed Constellation and Douglas DC-4 were relatively easy to fly, and did not require the extensive pilot training programs mandated for seaplane operations. One of the 314's most experienced pilots said, "We were indeed glad to change to DC-4S, and I argued daily for eliminating all flying boats. The land planes were much safer." No one in the operations department had any idea of the hazards of flying boat operations. The main problem now was lack of the very high level of experience and competence required of seaplane pilots. 20. Retirement. Borg Clipper Berwick landing at Lagos, Nigeria. The last Pan Am 314 to be retired, the California Clipper NC-18602, in 1946, had accumulated more than 1 million flight miles. 21. Of the 12 Boeing 314 Clippers built, 3 were lost to accidents, although only one of those resulted in fatalities. 24 passengers and crew aboard the Yankee Clipper NC-18603 lost their lives in a landing accident at Cabo Ruivo Seaplane Base, in Lisbon, Portugal on the 22nd of February, 1943. Among that flight's passengers were a prominent American author and war correspondent Benjamin Robertson, who was killed, and the American singer and actress Jane Furman, who was seriously injured. 22. Pan Am's 314 was removed from scheduled service in 1946 and the 7 serviceable B314s were purchased by the startup airline New World Airways. These sat at San Diego's Lindbergh Field for a long time before all were eventually sold for scrap in 1950. The last of the fleet, the Anzac Clipper NC-18611, was resold and scrapped at Baltimore, Maryland in late 1951. Borg's 314s were withdrawn from the Baltimore to Bermuda route in January 1948. Replaced by Lockheed Constellations flying from New York and Baltimore to Bermuda. 23. Variants. Model 314 initial production version with 1,500 horsepower, 1,100 kilowatts, twin cyclone engines, 6 built for Pan Am. Model 314A improved version with 1,600 horsepower, 1,200 kilowatts, twin cyclones with larger diameter propellers, additional 1,200 US gallons, 4,500 L, 1,000 imp gal, fuel capacity, and revised interior. Still air range approx 4,700 miles. 24, 6 built, 3 for Pan Am and 3 sold to BOAC. B3145 Model 314S pressed into military service with the U.S. Navy C-98. 4 Model 314S pressed into military service with the U.S. Army Air Forces operators. United States Pan American World Airways. United States Army Air Forces. United States Navy. World Airways. United Kingdom British Overseas Airways Corporation. Aircraft operated by Pan Am. Registration type name in service error marks Inc. 186011314 Honolulu Clipper 1939-1945 successfully landed 650 miles east of Oahu after losing power in 2 engines while flying for the U.S. Navy on November 3, 1945. Aircraft mechanics from the escort carrier Manila Bay were unable to repair the engines at sea. The seaplane tender San Pablo attempted towing into port, but the flying boat was damaged in a collision with the tender and deliberately sunk on the 14th of November by a Lycon 20 gunfire after salvage was deemed impractical. 2. NC-18602-314 California Clipper 1939-1950 flew from Auckland to New York in 1941-1942. 15. Sold to World Airways after World War II and was scrapped in 1950. NC-18603-314 Yankee Clipper 1939-1943 started transatlantic mail service. Crashed on the 22nd of February 1943 when Boeing hit the water during a turn-on landing at Lisbon, Portugal. A total of 24 of 39 on board were killed. 25. NC 1860431 Atlantic Clipper 1939-1946 purchased by the U.S. Navy in 19